Number 10. The Roast of Justin Bieber. You can't talk about celebrity roasts for very long without mentioning Justin Bieber, someone many think deserved what he had coming. Justin's roast was seriously harsh, as each roaster let loose all their pent-up annoyance towards the young star. One even pointed out that ISIS videos on YouTube were statistically disliked less than Justin Bieber's baby. Another said, "Time flies when you're a piece of shit," along with, of course, a few jibes at his failed relationship with Selena Gomez. The list goes on, and if you dislike Justin Bieber half as much of all these stars do, or at least enough to go and dislike his song Baby, you should make time to watch it. But Bieber bit back and got to have his say. For example, he called Jeff Ross the emoji you send to someone when you have food poisoning, and despite what can be described as one of the most brutal roasts, Bieber managed to hold up and bite back. Number 9. Stephen Colbert roasts George Bush. Some would say Stephen Colbert forgot where he was when he addressed the crowd at George Bush's presidential correspondence dinner in 2006. He acted as if it was his own show. He couldn't very well straight up insult the president, and in fact, he praised him as a great man. After giving his praise, Colbert then began pointing out each and every one of Bush's presidential screw-ups and his disappointing 33% approval rating. While the president did not seem to approve, the crowd certainly found it amusing and laughed with each roasting jab. The performance was so controversial that many believe there may have been a media cover-up of the event, as some later rebroadcasts cut Colbert's part out. While some people called the uncalled-for roasting rude and insulting, others thought it was just predictable Bush trash talk. Number 8. The Roast of Johnny Carson. Back in the day, Johnny Carson was often considered the godfather of all talk show hosts. So for his Man of the Hour roast, they pulled out all the stops and invited some of the best comedians of the time, including George Burns, Red Fox, Bob Newhart, Jack Benny, and Rich Little. Funnily enough, Rich Little played the biggest and best part of the performance and was the one to really bring the roast home with his clever impressions of Johnny's many mannerisms and his signature series of gestures and movements before delayed and underwhelming punchlines. He actually pulled out a long list of Johnny's gestures and movements and began listing them from stiff back, fixing tie knot, hands out to side, hands behind back, hands in pocket, finger under eye, finger under nose, and so on and so forth for a total of 22 gestures. Comedy might have changed since 1973, but some of the older roasts are still quite funny. Number 7. Amy Schumer roasts Charlie Sheen. Normally, a roast is supposed to be more or less in honor of one particular celebrity and at their request is meant to make fun of their character flaws, stupid actions, and general public image. So logically, it shouldn't have been too hard for a comedian like Amy Schumer to roast someone as vulnerable and laughable as Charlie Sheen. And roast him, she did, but not before deciding to light the whole hall on fire as she effectively roasted everyone there. She called Mike Tyson's face tattoo a slutty black rhino, said Patrice O'Neal was destined for stardom and diabetes, and she even hit both William Shatner and Kate Walsh in one sentence by saying that Grey's Anatomy wasn't just a TV show, but what William Shatner calls his balls. Eventually, she got to Charlie Sheen, said her piece about him, and then dropped a few more lines and left the hall burning down behind her. Number 6. George Takei roasts William Shatner. George Takei and William Shatner have had a beef ever since their old days on Star Trek, so you can imagine George Takei must have been quite excited to be invited to the roast of his old frenemy. When he finally got to speak his mind, he said, "I'm honored that you invited me to be here with you tonight. I can finally say what I've waited 40 years to say. Fuck you and the horse you rode in on." Other guests got in on the action, and a particularly funny line came from Lisa Lampanelli, who said, "When Elton John heard William Shatner sing Rocket Man, he spit George Takei's dick out of his mouth." Regardless of how the other celebrities performed, George finally getting out his vengeance on William Shatner was what really took the cake when it came to this roast. Number 5. Jagger Aldo roasts Daniel Lawrence Whitney. When it comes to celebrity roasts, Jagger Aldo is legendary. It was a difficult task to look at all of the roasts he took part of and decide which one was the best. However, his roast of Daniel Lawrence Whitney, also known as Larry the Cable Guy, was particularly hilarious. He noted how he had never roasted a fake character before and suggested that they roast SpongeBob SquarePants the next time around. Of course, the main gist of the evening involved the jokes of Whitney's Southern heritage, but one of the funniest, if not most controversial lines went, "Larry's whole act is a sham, like the Bible or the Holocaust." Nobody could say they didn't expect him to be as ruthless as he was, and the roastee took it all in good spirits, as every roastee should. Number 4. Seth MacFarlane roasts Donald Trump. Well before Donald Trump began wreaking havoc in the 2016 presidential election, he was being roasted by Seth MacFarlane. After making sure some of the stars in attendance were nice and toasty, he got started, making one more piece of garbage with Donald Trump's name on it. After all, they were there to honor a self-made millionaire. Seth MacFarlane complimented, "He started with nothing, worked hard, and made a fortune. That man is Fred Trump, Donald's father." You can go on and on with hilarious quotes from this roast, but one of the funniest, that Donald Trump is basically Jaden Smith with a comb-over. He then joked about Trump's prospect of running in the 2012 election, but it's doubtful Seth MacFarlane could have ever predicted the events of the 2016 presidential race. While it may have been a joke back then, it's still kind of funny now, although a few people are slightly more concerned than amused. Number 3. The roast of Hugh Hefner. As a celebrity, Hugh Hefner was a prime target for a serious roasting. When it comes to an easy target, it's expected that the greatest roasters will innovate new and better insults rather than just repeat what's already been said, which is unfortunately what most failed to do. Luckily, Jeffrey Ross eventually came up to the plate. One of his best zingers involved Hugh Hefner inspiring a young crippled boy to get up for the first time, just so he could turn off the Jerry Lewis telethon Hefner was involved in. Hefner was called many names that night, including perennial, perpetual, perverted, and several other big words that begin with the letter P, as well as being credited with making jerking off an international pastime. Roasting someone that seems easy to roast is much harder than you would think. After all, they've heard it all before. Either way, Jerry Lewis and company still did a fine job. Number 2. Lisa Lampanelli roasts Gene Simmons. Another legendary roaster is, of course, Lisa Lampanelli, and her roast of Gene Simmons was especially good. The guest panel, according to Lisa Lampanelli, was particularly ugly that evening, containing, for instance, Danny Bonaduce, who she referred to as Carrot Top. She even went as far to say that the only reason Jim Norton was there was to be a little eye candy. Gene Simmons thought this was hilarious, which unfortunately for him prompted Lisa to return her attention to the proper roastee and say, "Don't you laugh, Gene Simmons. You're nothing to look at. I mean, how did you come about with that hairstyle, genius? Did you catch Planet of the Apes on cable and go, One of her last lines actually won a mock award as one of the funniest misdirects ever written. What do you call a man whose songs will live forever in the hearts of millions of fans? What do you call a man that has inspired countless young people to pursue their dream of making a difference in the world? You call that man John Lennon. Number 1. Jagger Aldo roasts Bob Saget. Jagger Aldo appears here once again because his roasts are still the best to this day. Although when he roasted Bob Saget, he seemed to temporarily forget that it was Saget he was roasting and ended up spending half his stage time poking fun at people like John Stamos and Michael J. Fox. When he actually began roasting Bob Saget, he was completely relentless. He started out by calling him a genital wart on the cock of American culture, and continued his barrage by asking if he was surprised his dick is the same size it was in first grade. Of the night, perhaps the most devastating insult was, "Charlie Sheen watches you and feels good about himself." Jagger Aldo was and will always be the greatest roast master.